Alrighty, so now that we've identified the weaknesses, let's really get into the research-driven strategies. So there is a lot up here, and I'm just kind of going to glaze over it. So I found this research article, and it was pretty much perfect. Since we're all third grade teachers, this research article is about at-risk Title I students who are in third grade and how implementing specific small group strategies in math can help. It pretty much is perfect, and no, I did not write it. So as I was reading, I learned a lot about it that I can actually pull into small group strategies. So one of the things that this article talked about was how when you use the schema-based instruction strategy, you need to make sure that in a small group you include think aloud. So you show the students how to talk through the math in the different steps. So if they can talk through it, then that way it helps them transfer it onto paper. Also, just that interactive dialogue between a teacher and a student, talking through our math, that can be a great strategy to use, as well as having key representations and a procedural checklist. So this last point that I just said, the procedural checklist, is pretty interesting. So I actually pulled a clip from the PDF. So you can see the question says, Eric saw a pine tree in the forest. Later, he saw a maple tree that was 9 feet tall, and the maple tree was 5 feet shorter than the pine tree. So how tall is the pine tree? So I thought it was interesting because it uses the visual model of the pine tree, question mark, and it says it's bigger. And then it takes you to the next bubble, which then says the maple tree is 9 feet, and you know it's smaller. And then we already have our difference. So it really makes it more visual for them, and it helps them lay it out what they want, versus us just making them say, oh, okay, well, you see the difference, so you know we subtract. So helping make it visual might be a really good strategy for us to include when we are in small group. Next, the other really big takeaway that I had as a small group strategy would be to include they're saying it, FOPS strategy. So I know we typically use cubes, but I think FOPS might be cool to also integrate, maybe more so into small group. So the F stands for find the problem type. So maybe what kind of operation do you want us to do? Is it going to be addition, subtraction, is it multi-step? So it's important for them to figure out what that problem type is first. Then the O stands for organize the information using a diagram. So if they have one of these visual models, then they know, okay, it's subtraction, I can use this visual model. So that gets into the O. The P stands for plan to solve the problem, which is, we pretty much straightforward. And then S is solve the problem. So that's kind of a nice spin on cubes, and it can be the strategy that we also integrate into small group. So now that we've talked about what our problems are and the research to support it, let's talk about Zearn. So Zearn is an interactive and very specific math program that mirrors our current math curriculum, which is Eureka, and it also mirrors Engage New York. This is great because you can specifically choose lessons that go along with the exact lesson that we teach every single day. And every single module is also on there. Also, it's broken into different sections, so depending on the different lessons. So you're going to see a fluency section, which includes things like multiplication mania or sprints, which are great because that's also a terminology we use in class, as well as totally times and number gym. Next, you'll see the guided practice, which is really great. They're about 3 to 4 minute video, and it recaps what I have just taught in the whole group math earlier that day. So sometimes it's math chat, sometimes it's called Learning Lab, which is it's a guided practice based on the skill. It will identify their error and make them repeat the question until they get it correct, and it gives them cues as to how to accomplish the problem, which is great because that's an independent time that they can hear from another voice than the teacher. Next, you're going to see independent practice, which is always called Tower Power. And again, same thing. It identifies their error, and it makes them repeat it until they get it correctly. And then last, they get the bonus, which is just bonus practice to do. So that's a quick version of what you will see with Zearn, the program. Next, this is our baseline data. So this is the scores of my last math test previous to Zearn implementation. So you can see that I'm about 45% novice, and this is of my whole class, 16% apprentice, 28% proficient, and 12% distinguished. So as we go from test to test, of course we want to increase P&D and decrease novice, as well as move our apprentice kids up. So next we'll move on to our Zearn data before we look at my summative assessment data. So first, sorry, it's kind of cut off. This is our week 1. So if you take your attention over to the blue box, this was about the January 16th through the 22nd. So you can see that 8% of my students were completing 2 to 3 lessons, 3 or more lessons per week. So back to my vision statement, we want our kids to try to complete at least 3 lessons a week. And so only 8% of the students, and if you look down here at the bottom, I know my posters are down there, that leaves us 2 kids out of all of my 25. Now, that's not considering there's about 2 behavior students that weren't participating, and then about 5 additional special education students that were receiving a different math intervention. But still, we're going to look at them as a whole of 25. So only 2 students were in the green, which means that they were completing 3 or above. Now, above it, though, you will see the yellow category, and that was 8 students, and that means they were completing 1 to 2 lessons. Luckily, that means that we didn't have any in the red, but there were also a lot of students, and the strategy was different that first week. So my first week, as you can see over on the side, I retaught the exit slip from that day. It just, simple, small group, not including Zearn. And then I did think aloud examples with them on whiteboards, and then I put them on Zearn independently. So that first week, that's the data to represent that, okay? Now if we take a look at our second week, you can see it gets a lot better. We have about 9 students that are completing the 3 or more, 3 lessons or more a week, and then it bumps up to 8 additional students that are completing 1 to 2, and then the 1 student that is in the red is a student that is in he's in the special education class during that time. But so that bumps us up to about 18 or 17 students who were doing much better this week. My strategy, I did change it this second week. So we did think aloud examples. I threw out reteaching the exit slip. So I simply did think aloud examples with group 1. So back to that strategy in my research. And then I had the second group, which is my second lowest scoring group. They did a flashback based on information that was taught earlier in the day, and then they also got on Zearn independently. So right now, I was strictly using Zearn as a program for them to do by themselves. So then that's what's interesting is when you skip to week 3, my green category gets a lot bigger. So where it had previously been 9, it was then 12 students were accomplishing 3 or more lessons a week, and then you'll see 5 students were accomplishing 1 to 2 lessons. So our number keeps getting bigger. Week 4 goes down a little bit because then we took our math test, so we didn't complete the week yet. But you can see that my strategy also changed again. I changed my strategy each week. Week 1, 2, and 3, or week 1 and 2 were a little bit different. Week 3, I again threw out the exit slip reteach. I strictly did think aloud examples, flashbacks, and then instead of doing Zearn independently, I pulled the groups into the carpet with their Chromebooks, and I used the think aloud strategies and the thought strategy to help them. If I saw that they were struggling multiple times, I'd have them pause Zearn, and then I'd pull them over with a whiteboard, and we would think aloud the strategy. And then they'd get back on Zearn, and I'd be able to really monitor how they were doing. So it's not just mindless independent time. So this week you'll see the increase in data, and I think it's because that I altered my strategy again, and I really made it more meaningful.